Afternoon to our OHM BOCES webinar on presentational communication for Checkpoint A. This is the third webinar that we have hosted this year in support of our new Checkpoint A exams. If you have not gotten a chance to watch the previous two webinars, I would encourage you to watch the recordings of these. They're up on our website. So to get us started, my name is Dana Gaska, and I am the World Languages Program Specialist at OHM BOCES, and I work with the Chinese exams. I'm joined today by Louis Baskinger, our team leader for Spanish, Lucille Matt, our team leader for French and ASL, and Greg Smith, the Director of World Languages Programs here at OHM BOCES. So this is our agenda for the day. We will first have a quick overview of the OHM checkpoint exams if you are not familiar with them. We will be talking about Modern Languages Part 4, Presentational Writing, ASL Part 2, Presentational Signing. We'll go over some administration guidelines for the exam. We will talk about our rubrics, the dimensions in our rubrics, and scoring. Go through marker responses, and we will have a Q&A at the end of our presentation. So just a very quick introduction. If you are not familiar with our exams, we create exams for American Sign Language, Chinese, French, Italian, and Spanish. These exams are aligned with the New York State Learning Standards for World Languages, and they adhere to the principles and guidelines for adopting or creating locally developed benchmark assessments for Checkpoint A that was developed by the New York State Education Department. You can find more information about OHM BOCES checkpoint exams on our website, and I would encourage you to check out our website. There's a lot of useful information there, as well as the previous recordings of webinars that I mentioned. This is the overview of the format of our exams. I'm not going to go into detail here, but I would like to draw your attention to the portion of the exam that we will be talking about today, which is presentational communication. So for modern languages, this is going to be 30% of the total points on the exam. And for American Sign Language, this is going to be 20% of points on the exam. Okay, so I'm going to turn it over to Louis.
Yes, good afternoon. I'd like to talk a little bit about the introduction to Part 4, our presentational writing. We will have a Part 4A and a Part 4B. Part 4A is an email task. This task is worth 15 points, and the student will choose between 2 email prompts to complete. The student composes an email that completes the task and addresses the chosen prompt. Please take note, if you've used our exam, our Checkpoint A exam in the past, our email was actually a read to write, where students read the email and then they had to respond to it. That has been determined by New York State not to be a Checkpoint A level type of questioning. So the email, this time on our exam, for the first time in many years, our email is going to be where the students actually write an email. They do not respond to an email. So I wanted you to know that. They will have 2 choices. They read, they decide which task they find would be easier for them to answer, and then the students will go about that. The Part 4B pre-response task is also worth 15 points, and the student chooses between a text-based prompt and a picture prompt. And that is very similar to what we've done in the past. The student composes a response that completes the task and addresses the chosen prompt. So for all of the writing, for the 2 tasks that the student has to complete, they have a choice of them. Okay, we could go on to the next. Okay, so this is a sample of our task for modern languages. And this is exactly the way you will see the exam set up. Part 4A has 2 prompt options. Choose either option 1, option 2. You will notice that we will share information, like for share up information here, we're actually identifying the language function. We will give some scoring reminders to the students, for example, to address all parts of the prompt, to write in complete sentences, to organize your ideas, and to use a variety of vocabulary. Obviously, those are going to be reflected on the rubric. The task: compose an email in the target language that appropriately addresses the prompt below. Our prompt: you are making plans for an upcoming visit with your friend who lives in target country. Write an email to this friend about your trip to share your ideas about the trip, and to ask your student for ask your friend for ideas about the trip. You will see there will be 2 requirements of the prompt always. Okay, and then we're going to follow with a list of suggestions, and again they are suggested. We're going to target 3 language functions in our writing: describing, sharing information, and giving reasons. And all of the themes and topics come from our revised standard of 2021 of New York State. And these are based upon universally relatable life experiences that our students either experience in their own life, or their experiences that we develop through our course, by vocabulary and by units of study told to us by New York State. And these are produced and distributed annually by OHM. Introduction to Part 2, presentational signing for ASL. Presentational signing, students will complete 2 tasks, each worth 10 points. The point value for ASL is distributed differently, for a total of 20 possible points. For each task, students will use ASL to describe a clip art picture included in the selected prompt. Students are required to sign the main idea of the picture, as well as observations that support the main idea. Okay, and here is a sample prompt card for ASL. Again, you will see the task that's listed. Okay, in ASL, describe the picture, including the main idea and observations that support the main idea. Again, there are a list of suggestions, and again, we identify on our task card the language function. And students are required to sign the main idea and supporting details. It targets the language function of describe for ASL. It represents, again, a broad distribution of the themes and topics of the New York State Learning Standards. And they again are based upon universally relatable life experiences. And again, they are produced and distributed annually by us, by OHM BOCES. Where can you find these examination prompts? For part 2 for ASL, they can be ordered from OHM BOCES and shipped, and you can get this set of cards. It's currently at $4 per set. There will be digital versions of the prompts available in the World Language Information course on BUZZ, and online there is no charge. When can you administer? When can you start? For ASL only, administration can start anytime after April 1st. And it must be completed at least 5 calendar days prior to the administration of parts 3 and 4. However, please note, this type of activity should be regularly practiced in your classroom. Do not, our biggest recommendation is to not wait until spring or later to start this. This should be a habit in your classroom. And sample prompts are located on the released exams page of OHM BOCES, our website. Okay. And we're moving on. Lucille, I think your mic's off. Your mic is off, Lucille.
Thank you, Lou. I'm going to talk to you now about how presentational communication is scored. And that is one word, holistically. It's a different way of doing things that we're used to in the past. Gone are the days of word count or required number of sentences. We now look at the total package of the response. Holistic scoring is evaluating the student response in its entirety, rather than dissecting it into small individual parts or counting all of the words in a particular passage that is given to us to score. So before we're scoring anything, it is our recommendation that you actually review your students' responses, not score them, simply review them and get a feel for what is there, what might become your target marker paper, as opposed to something either high, the medium, and the low. By doing this, you get a feel for what your students are producing and how you might be grading them. But please remember, you're not grading anything until you have read the entire passage. That is one of the most important things we need to remember when we're scoring holistically. So we're going to talk about the completion of task. The completion of task is a gateway dimension. There are several dimensions that we're going to talk about today. We will explain them in the slides that are coming forth. And one of the things that we want to emphasize is that as the gateway dimension, if the student is unable to complete the task, then the remaining part of the response cannot be graded. We're going to be using a conversion chart for ASL. I will explain that, or we will explain that, I should say, as we go along. So this is the first of the rubrics that we're going to present. This is our presentational writing rubric for modern languages, and it will be followed by the ASL rubric. I'm going to focus on the first dimension, which is the completion of task. And as we go through this completion, there's a couple of things I want to discuss first. You're going to notice the two gray areas in the center. They say novice high, 6, mid 4, low 2, and an unrelated or non-communicative response at a 0. We weighted these more intentionally. If the student cannot complete the task, then they are not able to be scored at all. If the student receives a 0, everything else remains a 0. Very similar to what we've done before. If it's not answering what the question is, you cannot score it. So in the dimension of completion of task, I want you to pay attention to the fact that in the novice high, you're going to see that it says it clearly addresses the all the aspects of the prompt. And it is done by including details and or showing development. In novice mid, it says addresses at least one aspect of the prompt, and also by including some details, all right, as opposed to many details. And you can see that the first one, the 6, has an and or of showing development. We'll talk about development a little bit later on in our presentation. In the novice low has minimally addresses at least one aspect of the prompt. And there's no mention of any details. And then, of course, unrelated, the student fails to complete the task. There's either no response, or the student is entirely, their response is totally unrelated to the prompt. There may be words there, even sentences, but they're not associated with the prompt. Once you've given that score of 0, you may not give a score for any other dimension. And that is the reason why you see those red circles with the line through them. You cannot score those if you've given a 0 on the completion of the task. So we're going to move on now to the next page, or the next slide, I should say. And this one is for American Sign Language. You're going to see the similarities, and there is some difference, all right, as we go through the entire rubric. But for dimension, for the completion of the task, rather, Novice High, you're going to see the same thing. Clearly addresses all aspects of the prompt, including many details and or showing development. There's no change. It's the same identical wording. Same thing for Mid 4. It addresses at least one aspect of the prompt and includes some details. And for Novice Low, addresses at least one aspect of the prompt and no mention of any details. All right, so we're going to go on to the next one. And again, I want to reiterate that the gateway is very important, because without having scored on this, you are unable to score the rest. So we felt that the completion of task is graded higher. You'll notice the difference, 6, 4, 2, 0, as opposed to 3, 2, 1, 0 for the remaining dimensions. What is development and what it might mean? Development does not mean word count. So when you're looking at the checkpoint A level, development is the inclusion of additional information about a particular aspect of the response that the student introduces. Students can include additional information at will in various different ways. They can give us supporting details, they can give us descriptions, they can give us explanations or reasons. In other words, giving us the answers to questions like who, what, where, why. And then simple comparisons. And by simple comparisons, I don't necessarily mean that they know the comparative degree of adjectives, but they can compare by saying, I like pineapple. I don't like apples. That's a comparison of apples and pineapples. You can definitely instruct your students in that way. So in this one, on the comprehensibility and control of language, we are talking with the student can be understood by someone who is used to communicating with novice language learners. We are not expecting you to look at this rubric as a native individual and expecting to get native language back. Anyone who has ever worked with a novice speaker knows that there's going to be some element of confusion with idiomatic expressions, perhaps. But what we're looking for is that whatever errors they happen to make, you can get a 6 with some errors. But the errors do not interfere with the overall comprehensibility. The errors only matter if they interfere or cause some element of confusion. In ASL, that could include depicting verbs, inflection, non-manual signals. In non-target language words, such as English, are ignored. Except you may use proper nouns. Proper nouns such as a person's name, a title of a movie, a brand name, Coca-Cola, McDonald's. Those are considered comprehensible, even though they are not in the target language. Please note that anytime a student self-corrects, that is perfectly fine. It's very natural. It's a natural thing to do. You make a mistake in your own target language of English, we'll say, and you say, oh, wait, if the student does that, that's fine. Let him continue. Those errors do not count against him.
So this is for specifically for ASL in relation to finger spelling. It's a little unique. Modern Languages doesn't have this, of course. So for finger spelling, students may finger spell proper nouns, okay? Names of people, place names, brand names, etc. They are allowed to finger spell words that do not have an established sign. So these are things like mall or prom. They can also use it to introduce circumlocution. So if they finger spell the word for veterinarian and then they follow it up by a, animal doctor, this is perfectly acceptable. And when a student uses acceptable finger spelling, this does contribute positively to comprehensibility and control of language. You can count it as comprehensible. You can also count it towards vocabulary, okay, in the dimension of discourse and vocabulary. When a student uses any vocabulary that does not fit into this, when they finger spell words that there are established signs for that are not proper nouns, anything that does not fall into the category of acceptable, you should treat that as incomprehensible. So you should not count it towards comprehensibility and control of language, and you should not count it towards their score in the discourse and vocabulary. Discourse and vocabulary. So what language does the student use? What words does the student use? We're kind of looking at two different things in this dimension. So we're looking at the vocabulary and we're looking at the sentences. So for the novice high student, they're going to predominantly use simple sentences. They might have one incomplete sentence or they might have an odd phrase or something here or there, but the majority of what they produce are simple sentences. At the novice high level, we are also looking for students to introduce a wide variety of vocabulary. And when we say vocabulary, we mean words that are specific to the topic or the situation. So we're not looking for the little words like I or you or is. We're looking for something that's more topic related. And the vocabulary should be introduced at various points in the response. Instead of listing it all in one sentence, we'd like to see it throughout the student's response. And our last dimension is organization. So how does the student organize their ideas? At the novice high level, we are just looking that it is predominantly organized. And students can use a variety of methods to organize. It doesn't have to be anything complicated at this level. They can use grouping of ideas, sequencing. So just putting things together that are logical to go together. If you start out talking about your family, you should include all the information about your family instead of jumping to things that you like to do and then jumping back to your family. So they should try to group their ideas logically. If they're telling some kind of response that would include sequencing, so they're describing their day, they should start at the beginning and follow a logical order. They can use expressions of time, and they can use other basic transition words. None of these are required. They are all just methods that students can use to show organization. Okay, so we're going to spend a lot of our time today talking about the marker responses that we have in our manual. We're going to go through them rather quickly. So we're going to spend a little bit of time on each one, but there are 7 of them to go through. So we're going to kind of highlight the things that we feel are important. And we encourage you to look at these in our manual. Another thing I would like to mention, as Lucille said, when you are grading something holistically, it is subjective. So our team leaders spent a lot of time working together and determining how we would score these. And so when you are going through and scoring them, with your exams, we would like to encourage you to work together with your colleagues. That way, if you are lucky enough to have another teacher in the building with you on the day that you are scoring, discuss these things with them. When you have a question, you're not sure where something should fall, bring it to one of your colleagues and ask their opinion. It is subjective and it does take some practice. We're going to look, starting out, our first is the email task for modern languages. And so Lou went over this before, but just to remind you, this is the email task. So our student is asked to compose an email in the target language that appropriately addresses the prompt. They are given a list of bulleted suggestions, but they do not have to use these. Okay, so we're going to look at our first one for Italian. The task is to compose a response in Italian that appropriately addresses the prompt below. And the prompt is, you are making plans for an upcoming visit with your friend who lives in Italy. You're going to write an email to this friend about your trip, to share your ideas for the trip, and ask your friend for ideas about the trip. I'm going to give you a minute to read through. If you don't understand Italian, if you can't read Italian, we have included an English translation. In the brackets, we have included words that, these are places where the student made some sort of mistake. So it could be a spelling mistake, could be a conjugation error, could be an incorrect use of vocabulary, but we just wanted to highlight that for those of you who cannot speak any Italian. So I'll give everybody just a minute, and then we'll take a look at how we went through and scored this one. Okay, so here is how we went through and scored. So as you can see, this is a strong student, but they do have many errors in their writing. So like I mentioned before, they do have number and gender agreement, they have spelling errors, but they still were able to score full credit. For completion of the task, they have addressed all aspects of the prompt. They definitely share ideas for the trip. They talk about activities that they would like to do, places they would like to go. They talk about people they want to see. And they do also have a question about clothes to pack. We also feel like the response shows development because the student introduces ideas and then they add additional information. So for example, they introduce places they would like to go. They want to go to the capital. They want to go to the beaches and to the mountain. And then they also talk about activities that they would like to do at each of those places. They mentioned they'd like to swim, they'd like to hike, and they talk about shopping in the capital. So this one is clearly a 6 for completion of task. Again, comprehensibility and control of language. Even though the student has many mistakes, many errors, you can comprehend everything that the student said. You can understand what they are saying. So they would get a 3 for comprehensibility and control of language. Going on to discourse and vocabulary, the student uses predominantly simple sentences. They have all simple sentences in this case. And then the student also uses a wide variety of vocabulary. They have feelings, they have places, there's lots of different verbs, nouns, all throughout the response. So again, we gave this one a novice high. And for organization, again, the response is very logical. It starts out with the greeting and they're excited to go. They talk about activities and the places all go together and they have an ending that they can't wait to see everybody. It's very logical. You can follow it. It is organized. So again, we gave this one a 3 novice high for a total of 15 points. Okay. So moving on, we have a Spanish example.
Thanks, Dana. This response is a bit different than what Dana presented to you. So you will notice, again, the words in brackets are words that have an error. Again, either spelling, conjugation, accent mark, etc. Strikeouts, which we didn't see in Dana's response, are the words that the student wrote in English and did not attempt to put into Spanish. So when you read this sample, do me a favor and take out the English words as you're reading. So you're saying, good day or afternoon, my friend. My name is Olivia. Your is good. Very good. Go through that. I'm going to give you a minute to think about this, and then we'll determine, first of all, if it meets the prompt. Okay. Let's see. Did the student complete the task? Yes. Okay. The student completes the task here by using the targeted language function to compose a response that minimally addresses one aspect of the prompt. Okay. And what the evidence that we saw here is that the student does mention Buenos Aires, Buenos Aires. Okay. So we know that there is some idea of travel. The student does say that likes restaurants and shopping malls. So we cannot say that the student did not attempt to tag to the task. So it is definitely a novice low of 2. For comprehensibility and control of language, okay, if I take out all of those words in English and I look at the accent mistakes and spellings, does it impede all comprehensibility? No, there is enough there so that the student does score a novice low. For discourse and vocabulary, well, barely. There's little to no variety, but does have some vocabulary. Again, the mall, the common expression, and I liked. And then the organization, well, you know what? We gave it a 1 again for minimally organized, being that the sequencing and grouping is not really present because there's so much English. We felt that this is a very good example, a type of response that many of our students will complete for our exam because of them being just still novice low students. However, we don't want to discourage our students by not giving them the benefit of doubt, to give them some compensation for their attempt at completing the task.
I will talk to you about the next prompt, and this one is going to be written in French. And you can see the format is all the same. As you go through, you're going to find the language function in the black box again. You're going to find what they need to do in order to earn full credit, what the task is, and then the prompt. So the prompt for this upcoming response is, your French class is going to video conference with a school in Lyon, France. You are going to give a presentation in which you will talk about yourself and things you like to do. Those are the aspects of the prompt. write the script for the presentation. If you are a French teacher, there is the French, and the English is on the right-hand side. Once again, I'll give you a minute just to read through it. Okay, so as you can see, this student has a great deal of initial vocabulary, a lot of adjectives: nice, funny, tall, intelligent, interesting, fun. That's all in one paragraph. All right. Generally, we would like that the students use their vocabulary throughout, but that is something that we need to instruct the students, so that when the student is giving you such a long sentence with so much vocabulary in it, you want to make sure that you instruct them that as you go through, that they continue to give you more details. If they can do it in the first sentence, they can usually do it in the remaining sentences. We're going to look at the scoring. First of all, the student does accomplish this task in what I would term grand form for a Checkpoint A student, right? There are many details. They talk about personality traits, they talk about different family members, pets, and they talk about themselves, which was one of the aspects of the prompt itself. They talk about the things that they like to do: soccer and volleyball. They like to travel. And the response also shows development, because they've introduced the family is followed by a description of his brother, which is different from what the prompt was asking. They've added something more. That's what we mean by development. Comprehensibility and control of language. Did the student make any mistakes? Yes, they did. There were spelling errors. One was interesting. It was a very interesting way of spelling the word interesting in French. And then you had expressions such as accents missing on various words. You had gender agreement. You even had verb endings that are missing in the word habite. All right. They have habit instead of habite. The discourse and vocabulary. This student predominantly uses simple sentences throughout. The student introduces a wide variety of vocabulary. You cannot fault the student on vocabulary. Nice, funny, blue eyes, pineapple, travel, etc. And even the color of the hair as well as being brown. Those are all appropriate to the prompt. And for organization, the student ends appropriately. The student is predominantly organized. They demonstrate grouping. They talked about personal traits, their own personal traits, then family characteristics, then their likes and dislikes, all right, or likes or dislikes, and then they also added even more that they like to travel. So when you look at this, in the way that we've scored it collectively, we gave it a 15 out of 15 points.
Okay, I'm going to talk about our Chinese sample. So this is the same prompt as the French one. It's just been modified to be for Chinese. So your Chinese class is going to video conference with a school in Chongqing, China. And you're going to give a presentation in which you talk about yourself and the things that you like to do. Write the script of the presentation. So again, I'll just give you just a moment to take a look. Remember, the words that are in brackets mean that there is some sort of a mistake. In this case, there's some character mistakes, some word usage. And we will take a look and see how we scored this one. Okay, for this one, the student does a fair job, but they are missing part of the prompt. If you go back and look at the requirements of the prompt, you want to give a presentation in which you talk about yourself, okay, and the things that you like to do. So the student does include things about themselves, but they forgot the details about the things that they like to do. They do have some variety of details in there. but they are missing that component of the prompt. So we gave them a 4 for completion of task. For comprehensibility and control of language, again, there are mistakes. There's mistakes that are very common to novice learners in Chinese, but you can understand everything that the student has written. So we gave it a 3, a novice high. Discourse and vocabulary, again, there are 2 components to this. They do use all simple sentences. They don't have any phrases or single words. So that part is very good. Vocabulary could be a little bit stronger. So they do have some variety of vocabulary and common expressions. However, we didn't feel like there was enough vocabulary to push this up into the novice high. So we did give it a 2, novice mid, for the discourse and vocabulary. Organization, we felt that the student's response is predominantly organized. Everything is in a logical order. They group the ideas together. So when they introduce themselves, they talk about their age. Then they move on to their family. They talk about how many people, and then they talk about their pets. Then they go into their favorite food. So we did feel like it was an organized response, so we gave it a novice high. So total for this one, we gave 12 points out of 15.
Now we're going to look at option 2, okay, which is to compose a response that addresses a picture prompt. In your paragraph, you are to include the main idea of the picture and details that support the main idea. And again, we tell you that our language option is to describe our language function. We give you options, suggestions to include. Great recommendation is to tell students that if they choose to do the picture prompt, that they should follow the order of the suggestions, even if they don't include all of the suggestions, just some of the suggestions, because that will help them for organization. We've already done the work for them. Okay, so let's take a look, okay, at an interesting sample. If we could go on to the next slide. Okay. So in Spanish, compose a response that addresses the prompt below. Then give the main idea of the picture in details. Okay, so let's take a look at what this student wrote. A family is in a cafe. The family eating. This, we're not sure if it's this or does it mean it is. We're also not sure whether the word pasado means, is the student trying to say this is happening, or is he trying to say this happened on Sunday at the table? They are together because they are a family. They are happy, not lacking the family. We have no idea what that student is trying to express. The family goes to a cafe in their car. The eating, is it eating or is it the meal? The food is delicious. There are 6 in the family. Take a look. Again, this is a little more challenging because we've got to think about all of our dimensions. Again, has the student accomplished the task? Yes. Okay. The student has definitely completed the task using the target language function of description. The main idea clearly addresses all aspects of the prompt. Okay. And it shows development by giving us information. The family is in the cafe. They went there in their car, et cetera, et cetera. So it is a novice high for completion of task. 4, comprehensibility and control. Okay. We gave it a novice mid. Okay. Because of the fact that there is confusion. We we actually believe that this student is probably most likely have some heritage Spanish, because the types of mistakes that the student makes are certainly above a checkpoint A level. And unfortunately, the mistakes didn't help as far as what I should say, his knowledge or her knowledge of Spanish didn't really help for the comprehensibility, because there's such mixture of mistake within it. Okay, so it's a novice mid there. For discourse and vocabulary, there's lots of vocabulary that's correct in here. Okay, and so it's a novice high. And then for organization, we felt that it is more of novice mid, because there are a couple sentences that seem to be misplaced. So novice mid. So this student received a score of 13 for this response.
Well, I'm sure if you're a French teacher, or actually any teacher of a target language, and you are a veteran teacher, to look at our next example is painful. We look at this and we say, whoa, there are only 3 sentences here. And if you recall from the beginning of our webinar, we indicated that no longer are we counting words, or are we counting the number of sentences, or as we used to call them in the interpersonal communication, utterances. So we look at this and we have to remember we're holistically grading what the student has written. So as we begin to dissect this, the family is eat at a restaurant. That comes through. There's our main idea. Now, if you are a French teacher, you can look at this and say, there are 3 verbs in that sentence. Is, eats, because there's no accent, and which we know, and we've talked about as a teacher working with novice learners, we know that accentuation is often painted on or left off. And without the accentuation on the word it changes the meaning from to or at to has. So technically, this sentence could read, the family is, eat, has a restaurant. They look very joyous. This is saying they look at or they watch very joyous. But I think we can come up with the decision that the word regard is what the student is trying to say, is that they appear to be very joyous. And then the last sentence, the family 6. Okay, is the family eating at 6 o'clock? Is the family 6 people? We don't know. All right, we're going to take this apart and we're going to look at the completion of task. Did the student complete the task? Did they give us the main idea? Did they give us any details? The answer is yes. So we can score it. And we're not giving this a 0. We look at this and we say the main idea is the family eats in a restaurant. That's clear. First sentence says that. Then there are some details. We can come away with the feeling that the family's happy, and that we're making an assumption or drawing an inference that there are 6 members in the family, because that's what the picture shows. All right. Those are both included as far as details are concerned. However, it's definitely not a 6, but it's not a 2 either. We gave it a 4. For comprehensibility and control of language, can the student be understood? Quite well, actually. All right. They're using errors in spelling, in conjugation. There's incorrect vocabulary usage. So the errors, they do interfere with overall comprehensibility, but that first sentence really sets the scene here. We gave it a 2. For discourse and vocabulary, the student definitely predominantly uses simple sentences. Granted, there's only 3 sentences. We're not using word count. We're not counting sentences. This is the new state rule of holistic grading. And while it may be difficult for us to swallow it, it is something that we need to do. So we look at what vocabulary was used. They didn't introduce a lot of vocabulary, but there were a couple things like to eat and joyous that were definitely appropriate to the prompt. Organization-wise, the student's response is somewhat organized. It's not developed well at all, so it's definitely not a 3. But the student demonstrates grouping, ideas about the family. Those ideas go together. We gave it a 2, and for a total score of 10. Okay, we'll move on to the next slide. And this slide is for ASL. In this task, you're going to describe this picture. You can see that our function is described in the black box, rectangular box. And they're going to tell us the main idea, and they're going to give us some details that support that main idea. Now, this is the picture prompt, and I'm going to go back to what Lou has already told you, and that is we've set this up for the student to have success. If the student uses the bulleted suggestions, and not necessarily all of them, they're well on their way to scoring fairly well. I mean, given the structure of the sentences, etc. So if they use these sentences, although they're not required, they don't have to, and that clearly says that you may wish to include these in your response. I think it's a good idea for we teachers to definitely instruct our students to use these suggestions. Next slide, please. So before we go into this, I do want to explain something about ASL. What you are looking at in the middle of the page is what we call gloss. And gloss is not ASL. ASL is signs. It's a visual language. But in order to convey to someone who is going to be reading or signing, I should say, not reading, but signing ASL questions to the students, they need to know what non-manual signals they need to use. They need to know what is going to be finger spelled, etc. And if you look at, excuse me, the word Tom and the word birthday, you're going to find that there's hyphens between them. That indicates that they are going to be finger spelled. So in English, I think it's easier for non-ASL speakers or signers rather to read the English. Tom today went home after school. His friends are waiting because they are having a birthday party. Tom's mom made a cake, balloon. He is happy. And keep in mind that ASL varies from English grammar. They are not the same, nor should they be looked at the same. So we have our narrative as to what the student has written to convey the main idea and to support any details. So as we look at the English, do we have a main idea? Are there any details that the student conveyed while signing? So we're going to look at this and say, did the student accomplish the task? Absolutely. Okay, the student's main idea is that there's a party for Tom. And they've given us many different details. The mother made a cake, there are balloons, the boy is happy. All of that are details. And then the response also has some development. The friends are waiting because this must have been a surprise party. All right, cake and balloons are additional details that describe that party. We gave this a 6. Comprehensibility and control of language. The response can definitely be understood by someone used to communicating with novice language learners. There are some errors. Okay, there is incorrect or missing non-manual signs. Word order for time. There is no repeating to show plural. But they do not interfere with the overall comprehensibility. We gave it a 3. Discourse. The student predominantly uses simple sentences. It's what we would expect of Checkpoint A. They talk about a wide range of vocabulary, a birthday party, a cake, balloon, etc. And they use it at various points throughout the narrative that are all appropriate to the prompt. Organization. This student starts out in a manner in which they talk about going home from school, and when he gets home, he notices that his friends are waiting there, and then his mom made a cake. These are all ideas in sequential order. Very good organization. We gave this a 15.
Kudos to the team on all of the work they've done. This is a really good product, a really strong exam. We're really excited to have it ready for you guys in June. And certainly, if anything comes up between now and, you know, part 1 can be administered as soon as next week, and the exam for parts 2 through 4 or 3 through 4 in American Sign Language, when that comes up in June, any questions on administration and scoring, we're always here to help. Feel free to use those email addresses, get our phone numbers, give us a call, and we'd love to support you in all the ways you need it. Thank you to the panelists today. You guys did a great job.
Thanks.
And we look forward
Thank
to seeing all of you more and more over time. Have a great day, everyone.